Welcome back, everybody. Another installment of Fat City Spinout. Recent arrivals to the music collection. Deep dives from shelves. You know the drill. Coming at you with a bit of jazz today. After a long, hot, dry summer, weather started to cool off, fall's around the corner, and some jazz is hitting the spot every now and then. I did an order from the Impulse Records site a while back. They had a bit of a sale on. There's a few things I kind of had my eye on. One of them was this. I'd seen a lot of people show and talk about it when it came out. Thelonious Monk, Palo Alto. What we're listening to, Blue Monk, live 1968 at the Palo Alto High School Auditorium. Thelonious Monk and his band were brought in by a 16-year-old student at the school who was a budding concert promoter, huge jazz fan. He'd already brought in legends like Vince Guaraldi, Cal Tjader, and he brought in Thelonious Monk. Would eventually go on to work with Bill Graham. But he was still 16 here, learning the ropes, trying to raise money for the Peace Corps. And the story is told in the liner notes here of this concert. 1968, of course, very tumultuous time in America. The assassinations of Dr. Martin Luther King, Robert Kennedy, Vietnam War going on, racial tensions happening in Palo Alto, California, which was divided by the freeway. You had East Palo Alto, which was predominantly black and poor. And you had Palo Alto, where the concert was held, which was white, middle class, though liberal, predominantly liberal oriented. But for this one afternoon, when Thelonious Monk and his band were brought in, kind of united the community for an afternoon of music. Thelonious Monk himself was at a tumultuous time in his career. Record label didn't really know what to do with him. Rock was what was selling at the time. He was under various financial pressures, had health problems and family drama going on. He'd been in a coma earlier in the year following a seizure. But for this one afternoon, they put all that aside to just play music for the people. And you can hear, I think, they weren't phoning it in, they were in the pocket. Even playing one track, playing stand-up bass with a bow. I don't think I've ever heard that before. A crashing drum solo on that same song. And some great ephemera with this release. Reproduction of the program from the show. Reproduction ads of the time. And that is on Impulse Records, Thelonious Monk, Palo Alto. Apparently there's another mix of the show which was recorded by an unknown custodian at the school. Remarkably good sound quality considering the conditions. Keeping it on the jazz tip. Switching to John Coltrane now. Hadn't listened to John Coltrane in a while. This is again from my Impulse Records order. I find this couplet, this refrain, this riff very mesmerizing, hypnotic. This is taken from Both Directions at Once, the Lost album. Again, these are some recent reissues I've seen people posting, talking about, finally got around to picking up. This came out in 2018, double LP set, taken from tapes of recordings made in 1963 by John Coltrane and his band. Never released before. They were in possession of the family of his first wife, Naima. No one can tell his intention toward these tapes at the time. Was never released as an album. Also picked up Blue World. This was actually a soundtrack he did to a French-Canadian film. 1964, I believe, the following year after this. And this came out 2019 through Impulse Records. And this found him revisiting some old tracks from his back catalog, something he was not a common practice for him, John Coltrane, in a very rapid acceleration in the sophistication of his music at this point in time. Blue World, John Coltrane. And I was a bit taken aback when I looked in my collection to realize I did not own A Love Supreme, one of the greatest albums ever recorded. It was one of the first jazz albums I ever heard too, way back. I took a copy out from the library, didn't quite connect or click with it at the time, but I figured I'd better add that to my collection. So I got the complete Masters edition, monster 4 LP set of this iconic jazz album, expanded with some alternate takes. One of the greatest albums of all time, recorded in one day, December 9th, 1964, with a couple of tryout alternate takes recorded the next day, which did not end up making the cut of the final album. John Coltrane, one of the greatest musicians of all time. I've spoken before about UK jazz saxophonist Shabaka Hutchings, who is part of the fertile new UK jazz scene based in London. Hutchings is involved with a number of groups revolving around him as the creative epicenter, the axis, if you will. Among these are Shabaka and the Ancestors, a spiritually jazz-inclined ensemble of mainly South African players he works with. There's also the Kemet is Coming with a different crew of collaborators, which adds electronic textures for something of a rocket-fueled techno-jazz odyssey into the cosmos. But perhaps the most militant group Hutchings works with, the most rooted in issues surrounding the world today, issues of race and justice, is Sons of Kemet. In 2018, Sons of Kemet put out Your Queen is a Reptile on the new Impulse Records label. Each track on this album posits a black female from history as an alternative to any imposed European imperialist monarch. The Sons of Kemet sound revolves around the interplay of Hutchings' sax with the tuba of Theon Cross, which sometimes acts as another layer of percussion, and also brings in elements of Caribbean sounds, reggae, dub, bit of dancehall, bit of calypso for a unique sound that is particular to the Sons of Kemet. They have just put out the follow-up to that album, 2021's Black to the Future, also on Impulse. And for this record, for this edition, I went for the Vinyl Me Please pressing, limited edition on translucent gold vinyl, and that is numbered 119 out of 1000, Vinyl Me Please exclusive pressing. This picks up the narrative immediately in the aftermath of 2020 and the flashpoint that occurred around issues of racial justice, particularly as regards to Black people in the world today. This first track on here features a spoken word vocal by Joshua Idahan, who is also on Your Queen is a Reptile, bringing up references to those images of 2020 we all saw, as he says, one knee on my back, another on my lungs, and goes on to say, I do not need your equality. It was not yours to give me, giving an urgent, agitated tone to the rhythm. This is militant jazz. This is not easy listening by any stretch of the imagination. As it goes on, Think of Home, almost sounds like an instrumental that could have come out of Studio One in Jamaica in the 1970s. Hustle brings in something of a skittering dance hall feeling. For the Culture brings us to the back streets of Kingston, Jamaica with a bit of dance hall DJing. Bashment DJing. To Never Forget the Source is an instrumental that starts off with something of an exotic North African style melody as the horn notes play off into the warm African night, and it goes into In Remembrance of Those Fallen. It becomes clear this album is something of a funeral march for those lost to miscarriages of justice in the world today. And it ends with this inchoate explosion of grief as horn notes are clipped, strangled, choked into almost incomprehensible forms of despair, an outpouring of grief that is something of the emotional climax of this album. And it becomes clear this is a wake, it's a funeral march. The last couple of songs, Envision Yourself Levitating, Throughout the Madness, Stay Strong, almost something of a military march as horns fire off into the sky with percussion marching alongside. These are sounds of almost of troops going into battle, metaphorical battle on the front lines of social justice today, with Black being the final message as the final battle is about to be joined. Highly recommended. Important music for our times. Switching it up with some reggae now. Winston Samuels in a rocksteady style. Don't believe him, he's lying. From the album Leaping with Mr. Lee, just reissued, brand new to the collection, just arrived. And I don't know if you can see, this is signed by the great man himself, passed away a little while ago. I did a spotlight video on him at the time. I believe this is the very first album of Bunny Lee's productions ever released. Came out in 1968 originally, never reissued until now. Originals, very rare and expensive of this. And this is a various artists album of the many artists the great producer worked with. The Uniques with Slim Smith, Glenn Adams doing over the Beatles, I Want to Hold Your Hand. Pat Kelly, the great Pat Kelly, I did a video on him as well when he passed. Winston Samuels, as we're hearing. Delroy Wilson on there as well. Another one I've done a video on in the past. And this is on a new label, Bunny Stryker Lee. Apparently these reissues were in the works before he passed away, got held up, and a number of signed copies were available for a short time. Managed to snag one. 1968, Bunny Lee Productions. A few videos back, I was showing a Pressure Sounds compilation called When Josh Shall Come. One of the tracks on there that I think I needle dropped was by Joss Smile, Ethiopian Rock. Joss Smile was a DJ. Bunny Lee convinced him to switch to singing under his proper name, Barry Brown. Barry Brown would go on to be a very prolific singer in the late 1970s into the 1980s. Diametrically opposed to this kind of rock-steady sweetness, he was in the very raw, kind of a roots and culture sound. And his debut album from the late 1970s also reissued as part of this series. Playing for convenience here from the CD at King's House, Bunny Lee Productions. This is Barry Brown Showcase. I gotta kind of cover this up for modesty's sake, but this is also a signed copy by the late great producer Bunny Lee from his label Bunny Stryker Lee. Just came out. Number of copies, signed copies, were available for purchase. This is another one. I think it came out in the UK on the Third World label. It's another one that's going to set you back probably triple digits if you can find a copy. So nice to add both of those to the collection. More works of the late great Bunny Lee. We just lost Lee Perry not that long ago. Two titans right there within a year of each other. Probably the last two really great Jamaican producers of their generation with vast, unfathomable catalogs of music to their names. Alright guys, that is going to do it for today. I have some used vinyl finds to share with you as well. I think I'll spin those off into another video, try and keep these a little bit compact. I have an upcoming spotlight on Adrian Sherwood and On You Sounds. Just a heads up, that one is a long video, the longest I've ever done. Kind of thought about splitting it up into two, but in the end I just said the heck with it. No obligation for anyone to watch that. If you're interested, it'll be up there at some point. But yeah, look out for that one in the future. Thanks to everyone who watched this one. Cheers and see you next time.